one guy who is never standing still on Friday nights.
More energy than you will ever lose.
He is the chief executive of the DQ Big Game of the Week. I think I got his title right. We are joined by the man, the myth, the legend. It's Neil Beasley. Neil!
I like that title.
What's going on, Bees?
Want it. I'm going to start handwriting that on all my cards.
Yeah,
yes.
You should. That would be huge. So, how many years is this for you with the DQ Big Game of the Week?
Well, it's 14 total and 11 for me because Rick Renner started it.
That's right.
Wow.
Dude, can you imagine Rick on the road?
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Oh, my gosh.
Craziness. Yeah, so he started it all. In fact, he kind of it was getting a little much, just week after week and whatever. So he was like, hey, I'd like to go to the, be in studio and whatever. And when I took it over, I was nervous, man. Rick did such a great job with it. I was like, holy cow, what in the world am I supposed to do? How do I follow that? I can't go up and go, hey, go easy, big fella,
Yeah.
Well, but I don't think I think most people would say that it has not skipped a beat now that you have.
Well, it's easy to get into. You know what I mean? It's there's just so much meat to sink your teeth into every week, every year. It doesn't matter. Big school, small school, they're all fun. They're all different. They're all unique. And there's always something to talk about, especially in this state. It's football, high school football's nuts, and it's fun to be nuts with them.
Yeah, and that to me is what separates what you guys do versus maybe any other of these kind of big game packages is that you guys are going through and talking about the game. And that's obviously important. But it seems like for you guys rightfully focus on what's going on around the game, which seems like when you guys have the most fun.
Yeah, it's all of that stuff because there's so much history in the towns or the teams, and there's so many places. And I grew up in Florida, pretty good football in Florida. Played high school football, played college football in Florida, pretty good football. But the difference is there's so much passion here in Texas, and I think most of it stems from the fact that this kid who's going to high school A, his parents went there, their parents went there.
Yeah.
Their parents went there. You don't get that in Florida.
Yeah.
Florida, you get this kid's going to high school, and his parents, where'd they go? Oh, somewhere in New York, somewhere in Massachusetts. And you've got these deep roots, and so that's why in a town of 3,000, you get 5,000 showing up at the high school game. That's an atmosphere. I mean, that is an atmosphere no matter where you go and what you're talking about. So we love covering the towns. It's part Texas history and sports, and we love showing off the bands. We're going to have the big bad band from Rabbitland this week. It's just crazy stuff. We love it all.
Now, I want to ask you, before we get into this week's game and really the whole slate as a whole, I want to ask you, is there one, you've been doing this now 11 years, more than a decade, not to date you, but...
Right.
Is there one story or one place that when people say, "Hey, what's the crazy story you've got from the road?" What would be your story?
You know what? It's funny. There's obviously like 7 ones. How about that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
One, obviously, my son was a senior at Rockwall High School. We got to cover him. They won their DQ game. That was a blast. My whole family was there. I got to cover my son. How great is that?
Sure.
Yeah.
We went to. We've been dying to go out to that unbelievable Frank Lloyd Wright Stadium in El Paso. We finally got to do a game out there. Not only that, El Paso played Cathedral High School. That's where my nephew went to school.
Oh my gosh!
And he was a sophomore. So he wasn't a senior, wasn't playing necessarily, but he was on the team, and that made that one special. The thing when you compare and contrast, we go to Allen, who has almost 1,000 members in their band covering the field. We also go do a 6-man game out in West Texas. We go to their pep rally, Whit Harrell High School. Their band is one guy banging a bass drum. That's the stuff that I remember and just sticks out when you say, hey, DQ Big Game of the Week. Those are the things that stick out, things like that. It's crazy. Plano West was so big, they packed their gymnasium for the pep rally, right? Mm-hmm. They did a 45-minute pep rally. They emptied the gym. That was just the juniors and seniors. Then they packed it again with the freshmen and sophomores, did the exact same pep rally.
Awesome.
Lord.
Awesome.
I mean, it's nuts.
It's Neil Beasley. He is the mastermind behind the DQ Big Game of the Week, which you can see on Fox Sports Southwest every week. And so let's talk about this schedule. You guys, once again, put together this crazy schedule that you've just decided to go literally everywhere in the state. What is the mindset behind putting together the DQ Big Game of the Week schedule?
Well, I'll tell you how we do it, nuts and bolts. First of all, I sit down basically the month of June, whenever the Dave Campbell's comes out, the polls come out, the schedules are all finalized. I'll sit down with all that information and basically just hold myself up away from my family for our 3 weeks and come up with pretty much 12 to 15 games with a hook. I don't mean 12 games. I mean 12 games that have a hook or a reason for every week of the season. Then we sit down 1st of July with the DQ operators. There's about 3 or 4 of those guys. Great guys. Passion for high school football as well. And that's really what's made this go from the get-go. And then we'll sit down and pick one of those games for each of the weeks. And it goes back and forth with, oh, this would be an unbelievable game. Oh, wait a minute, we did them last year. We probably should. Okay, let's try about this one. Oh, we've already got a game here. So it's a good, a couple hours, but you circle one, and then one turns into 2 and 5 and 6, and pretty soon you got your whole schedule.
Yeah, because the thing for you and the advantage that you have in this sense is that inevitably you're trying to project out a game for week 10. And it's the kind of thing that, like, it's not that the quality of the game is not necessarily the deciding factor, but obviously you'd like a quality game. That's inevitably that's what you want. But also inevitably, one of those teams between the 6 teams that you'll feature in weeks 9, 10, 11, one of them's going to end up disappointing. One of them's going to end up being a dog. And yet at the same time, it doesn't matter because you guys, that's sometimes when you guys do your best work.
Well, what will, the only real thing that will kill us is if a team turns into a dog because of an injury or something along those lines, and the other team is just absolutely rolling. It's very hard to say, okay, if they can punch it in here, they'll cut the lead to 35. They can't do it. The other team gogoes down and scores again, 65-0 your final. That's tough. But if the game has built-in hooks around it, if it's a rivalry game, well, 3 minutes of that feature, we haven't even kicked off yet. And we've been talking about the bonfires and the pep rally here and then the pep rally over there where they hang this guy in effigy. And when you've got all of that good stuff, the game can be, oh, yeah, by the way, here's the game and it wasn't that great, but here, this guy was great, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, that's, again, why I want to make sure when I walk into that room with all my potentials, that every one of those potentials, I've got to be ready for the DQ folks to pick every single game on there because I got to cover it. I got to make something out of it.
And of course, you guys start off, as you always do, with a bang. You guys get a terrific East Texas matchup. Atlanta taking on Henderson. What are you most excited about for this game? Obviously, the game on the field interests us. I'm excited to see what this Atlanta defense, which is supposed to be so good, looks like against a speedy Henderson team. But for you, what are you most excited about for Atlanta and Henderson?
Well, I'm hoping Ellen DeGeneres shows up.
That's right.
Alum. We put in calls to her. Just I've got her cell. I've texted her. Hey, buddy, you want to show up? But I think it's just that. It's 4A. I love the smaller, the 4A, the 3A, because it's crazy to me. We go to a Tatum-Gilmer game, something like that, and there's 7, 8, 10 Division I kids on the field. Where else do you see small school like that with that much talent, Yeah. And I think this matchup, and I'm glad that so many people in Texas, when you look at a schedule, our DQ schedule, you could look and say, wait a minute, where's the Allens of the world and the Plano West and the Cedar Hills and stuff? And we love getting those guys too, don't get me wrong. But it's the games like Atlanta and Henderson where you've got some of these studs. Tristan Allen, I mean, this kid's 6'4", 220. He's been a 4-year starter. You've got 2 guys going to TCU on the other side of the ball. You've got this great talent. You've got a team that went 7-3 last year, but they missed the playoffs because they were in the District of Doom? Is how called?
Yes.
And then you got Atlanta goes 4 rounds deep last year. I mean, so you've got this great football that maybe if you're not in East Texas, you don't quite understand. Who's Atlanta, who's Henderson? Not really sure about these guys. We get to show them off to the rest of the state, which I think is great. That's what I love doing.
And the thing is, in other states and other places, you say, the Allens and the Plano Wests, and the Cadies and those teams. In other states, you may need to rely on those. In this state, you don't. I mean, it's not that you don't want them. It's that there can be tens of other stories that maybe don't get told, and that's what you guys have the unique advantage of doing.
Yeah, and it's really nice because it could be very easy for when we release our schedule. It could be there's only 22 teams on the schedule. Out of how many 1,000, whatever 1,500, how many teams?
Yeah.
1,400 teams. It could be very easy for all those other kids and coaches and adults and alumni to go, wait a minute, where's my school? This stinks. The schedule stinks. But we don't hear that at all. That's what another thing I just love about Texas is you hear other parents and other coaches and other whatever saying, you got Stratford Canadian. Oh, I love that's a great rivalry. I bet you this year Stratford gets them. And you got the Bird Bowl in Harlingen. Oh man, the Valley plays good football too. Nobody knows it because nobody covers. So it's nice to see that other people appreciate all the other good football around the state.
One last question for Neil Beasley before we let him go. What are we thinking about UCF this year? Your alma mater, and of course you are the star wide receiver and returner.
Exactly.
For them.
Right.
What do we think of them?
That's what my mom definitely says in the press release. Man, I just want to win a game. Oh, come on!
All right, we're gonna.
No, we got Scott. We got our frosty offense. Scott Frost did it at Oregon. He's bringing that speed. Florida's got speed to burn with their recruits. Yeah, we'll be good to go.
Don't forget about the statue for the legendary coach George O'Leary.
Yeah, that's what we need.
I think it's going next to mine.
He's Neil Beasley. Follow him on Twitter at Neil Beaz, B-E-A-Z is how you spell that. And he will be out at Atlanta and Henderson for the DQ Big Game of the Week. Neil, appreciate your time, buddy.
We will see you boys soon. Thank you.
Have fun, buddy.
All right, buddy.
There he goes, Neil Beasley.